Welcome to the Homelab Show, episode 78, Changelog and Updates. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing very good. How are you?
Great. This episode is going to be about changes to products we've talked about. And I wanted to put this together because we're like, well, there's a new version of this, there's a new version of that. And me and Jay were going back and forth. They're like, well, there's a lot of little new versions that are incremental changes, and they don't warrant, I think, a complete new dedicated video to the new version. But cumulatively, if we talk about these projects that we have other podcast episodes on, we say, hey, people maybe have a good weekend project coming up here. Because if you're in the United States, at least, I was reminded of this just the other day, that it's not an international holiday, just a U.S. holiday is Thanksgiving. That is going to be tomorrow. So if you have some extra downtime over this extended days, maybe you want to update to some of these projects we're going to talk about.
Yep.
And I think actually Jay's doing a last minute ad. So if for those of you watching this and wondering if Jay looks a little pensive staring at it, that's
Yeah,
because
I'm actually doing some updates right now. So we
he's
could maybe just get right into the ad read. And then after that, I'll talk about what I'm up to.
Yep, absolutely. And our ad sponsor today is Linode. And we seem to have gotten an email from them that they're going to continue sponsoring it. Me and Jay were just talking about that. They've been actually great. I got to meet some of Linode people in person at an event I was at a couple weeks ago, which is really cool. Great company and a great place to host the projects that we talk about. If you're listening to this podcast because you downloaded it from our server that is hosted on Linode. Thanks to Jay for maintaining that. But it's a great place to host your projects. We got an offer code down below for the Homelab show if you'd like to use Linode, and we thank them for being a sponsor of the show.
Yep.
All right. Well, we have people jumping in the live stream here. Jay live updating things. I can start with a few things
Mhm.
that are coming, and one of them is kind of a big one. And I love XCP&G for virtualization. It's been my go-to virtualization platform. Jay likes Proxmox, and there's nothing wrong with Proxmox. You guys can debate it in the comments. We've both, me and Jay, have covered them. He's got in-depth videos on Proxmox. I have in-depth videos on XCP&G. So whichever one you choose, hey, they're both a good choice. But the new 8.3 release candidate, or they call it alpha, but I'm going to call it more like a release candidate of XCP&G is out, and it has some really cool new features. Now, one of the big complaints with XCP&G, and point to Team Proxmox over there, is having an integrated, I don't have to load third-party management tool for the web interface. This is one of the challenges sometimes people have with XCP&G is there's a component called Zen Orchestra that is the best way to manage all your instances, but obviously it's a third-party load. Their XO Lite system is coming to the XCP&G. Now, you can actually load this in the 8.2, the current stable release, but they're coming integrated with XO Lite. So XO Lite is slowly coming along, but nonetheless, I mention these things because I think the Homelab crew is also the, hey, let's test it crew. So I think it's kind of exciting to play with some of the new things, participate in their forums and feedback of how to make it better. Also of great interest to the Homelab people in this 8.3 release is going to be better Intel NUC support, 2.5 gig NIC support. So yes, those Intel and Realtek 2.5 gig NICs, they've added drivers in 8.3 for those. VM snapshot with disk exclusion. Now, this is for all of you doing special pass-through things where you want to do snapshots and it wants to snapshot all the drives. They've kind of baked in now the snapshot disk exclusion and VTPM support. Now, I haven't tested that yet, but that's coming here in 8.3. I believe that's still a little rough around the edges, but progress is being made for those of you that need the VTPM. So that's the kind of good list of updates. Just a blog post, easy to find. I'll actually throw it in the show notes, but it's on the xcpng.org/blog. They have all these details in there. So I'm pretty excited about the new release coming out. When it finally drops, I will probably do an updated video because it's been a little while since I did a getting started with XCP&G, but I'm really excited where the project's going. It's amazing how fast they're iterating on all of these things. And hopefully soon I'll be talking about their new SNM API, the basically the storage driver. They're building a completely new storage layer that's going to be greatly enhanced from the current one. So that's also kind of coming. I know people always ask about their hyper-converged solution. It's all kind of tangled in there going forward. And by their own words, the old one, yes, it's full of spaghetti code. Yes, it's old. That's why they decided to do the hard work that is called refactoring. They're not fixing the spaghetti code anymore. They refactored a completely new update to it. So it's going to be substantially better. And Jay will tell you, man, there's not many places that want to refactor. Everyone just keeps grabbing the spaghetti code and throwing a little more spaghetti code on top of the spaghetti code.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm the only one that likes refactoring, that enjoys it. That might sound insane, but there's something about taking a really long program or script and condensing it down, and it's the same program, but it just is just so much easier to maintain. And then later on, you'll appreciate it because when you go back to make an adjustment to it, yeah, that's very easy for me to find what I'm looking for because it's well refactored, consolidated, condensed, and it just looks great. But I know a lot of people probably just don't have time to do that though.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, with any of these projects is time. People want the fixes now. They go, "Hey, I'd really like to see this added to the product." Well, to do it right is going to be a 6 month to a year project of paying people to refactor code to bolt it on the existing code and twine it in there and tangle it with the current spaghetti code. Yeah, you can get that done in about 30 days and you'll get the thing. It won't work as well as the refactored version, but that's where it always comes down to how much runway do you have, because somewhere along the line someone has to pay all these technicians or do the time it takes to get that done. And in the meantime, are you worried someone will go somewhere else looking at a different product? So yeah, there's a lot.
Yep. Yeah, totally. So speaking of virtualization, we have Proxmox version 7.3 is out. And I discovered it like 2 minutes after I wake up. I'm just, getting up out of bed, check my phone. Oh, there's new Proxmox. Great. So I know what I'm going to be doing later. And that's one of the things that I'm updating right now as we talk, because I figured, that'd be kind of fun. Why wait until after? This is kind of what we do, right? We check out new things and I don't know about you guys, but I like new things. It's kind of like when you get an update, it's like a present under the Christmas tree,
Oh
but
yeah.
there's no Christmas tree, but it's really nice, the feeling, and you keep getting that feeling every time there's something new that's out with something that you enjoy and there's a new feature. Um, so given that, Proxmox, I only just discovered that it was out as of today, which it might have actually came out today. I think there might be a time zone difference. The date is yesterday, the 22nd on the release notes, but again, time zone difference, I have no idea. So this is version 7.3, so it's not like an 8.0. We're not expecting like a major overhaul of anything, but they have some interesting things here. For example, offline update support, something that, yes, I know XCP&G has had that, forever because it inherited that from Citrix. But, if for whatever reason, if you have an offline Proxmox, which, that's probably the most secure way to run anything is completely offline, then you could download patches onto a flash drive or something, as long as the repository you're getting the patches from isn't like completely broken into. Then yeah, that's probably a good secure way to do that, and it has support for that, so you can load your updates on a flash drive and you can do it, which is interesting to me because technically it's always had that feature because Debian allows you to do that. You could just dump a bunch of deb packages on a flash drive and mount it and just install all of them. But it's better to have official support than doing it that way. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way, but sometimes you might want a more official way of doing that. But again, I'm just checking it out for the first time, and I'm updating my Proxmox servers right now as we're talking, as well as TrueNAS. I'm also updating TrueNAS as well. So other features in 7.3 support for Ceph Quincy. Quincy is the 17th release of Ceph, apparently, so it supports that. There's templates for Alma Linux and things like that. I don't know if I thought I saw that in the release notes, but it's there.
Yeah, I've seen there's
Um,
a lot of new templates in there. I was reading through
yep,
the release details. That's on the release details page.
yep, and there's tags. Well, tags are visible in the UI, and apparently you could edit them in the UI as well, which is pretty cool. Initial support for cluster resource scheduling in this release, so that sounds pretty promising. So it's not going to be one of those life-changing releases, but there's just a lot of really cool updates that will definitely make the experience better. And now that the packages are done downloading, I'm going to restart my Proxmox servers now and be on the new release. So yeah, apparently we have a new Proxmox to check out for those of you running on that platform, which is always pretty cool. And another thing I thought about bringing up was the new Fedora, because I really like it. It's really good. And some people might be thinking, well, that's a workstation. I mean, it's right in the name, Fedora Workstation. We're not running servers on Fedora, are we? Well, there is a server version of Fedora. So yes, some people are doing that. And I covered Fedora 37 in a dedicated video review I put on the channel recently. And I really liked it. The Raspberry Pi version just didn't work at all, which is really weird. That's one of the highlights of the release, is that there's official support for the Raspberry Pi 4. Doesn't work, at least in my experience. I re-imaged a flash drive, or excuse me, SD card, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, and it just couldn't get it to boot. But then on that same flash, or I keep saying flash drive, that same SD card, I loaded Ubuntu, the Pi version of that. It's fine. So the hardware is fine, and it's the Pi I use for many different things. But for some reason, their official Pi support didn't include full QA of the
Huh.
release, apparently. But that being said, maybe they'll get that fixed really soon. I hope they do. And yeah, that's something that everyone can enjoy once that's up and running. But Raspberry Pi version aside, it's running on Linux kernel 6 and GNOME 43. I still say Fedora has the best implementation of the GNOME desktop, vanilla GNOME specifically, than any other distribution out there. It's just so tightly integrated in a way where it's like, I mean, there's GNOME OS, which is a reference distribution for implementing GNOME, but I feel like Fedora is the better reference distribution for GNOME because it's a fully usable workstation distribution that's come a long way. It has a lot of software for it, and you get the latest GNOME desktop, the latest software. So there's not really a whole lot to say about Fedora 37 in terms of the workstation version. But getting back to the Homelab side of things, Fedora Core OS is an official flavor, which is really cool. And it's interesting because we used to remember Fedora as Fedora Core. That's what its first name was. And then later on, it became Fedora Workstation. And now we're putting Core back in the name, but it's not the workstation version. It's a completely separate version of Fedora that is dedicated for running container workloads. And it's something that I mean to try out pretty soon. I actually can't wait to get my hands on it and check this out. But if you wanted a container operating system, then that could be a very good thing to check out. And there's also Fedora Server. That's not new. That's existed for a while. So I'd be interested to hear from people that are running Fedora Server on their home lab. That'd be pretty cool to find out what that experience is like for other people. I haven't actually had a chance to check that out in a while, so I hope to do so. But Fedora Cloud is back. Apparently, it went away. I never knew that was the case. But the Fedora Cloud version, just like the name implies, is a cloud image for, OpenStack, cloud providers. There's a QCOW image, I believe, for your virtualization platforms. So if you want an image that's basically designed to be run as a virtual machine, well, now you have that again, I guess. So that's a little weird, but the Raspberry Pi version, I only mentioned that just in case anyone wants to run that, and we have a lot of Raspberry Pi fans in our audience. But overall, I think Fedora 37, other than the Raspberry Pi situation, is a really good release. I do recommend it a lot. I think it's very fast. It just feels like buttery smooth. It's just a really great experience. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm still stuck in the Debian and Ubuntu worlds. It's funny because I started out on Red Hat in the
Right.
90s, but then I switched sometime in 2003 or 4. I can't remember exactly. It's
About the
about the
same time for me. Yeah, absolutely the same. Fedora, Red
yeah.
Hat, Fedora, and then around the same time it was Ubuntu.
Yeah, but, I don't have any problem with it. It's just like, you stay with the environment you're familiar with. I haven't run into any hiccups. I can find good documentation on how to get things done, so that's usually the factors that keep you in a particular distro. Kind of
Yeah.
note, and this was kind of a hiccup with my Dell laptop. I don't know if I'm gonna review it or not, because I don't think it's the best Linux laptop, but I do run Pop! OS on there. I had some problems when Pop! OS moved to the 6.0 kernel. It had broke the ability to have audio. The good news is the Pop team actually had a fix for it to migrate to the one version up in beta kernel, which then became the mainstream kernel after about a week. But that's been Pop! OS is still my daily
Yeah.
go-to for my desktop. I mean, I've thought about trying something else. I don't know. I'm just so used to everything just working in Pop! OS.
Yeah, Pop! OS is still my favorite distribution. But as I look at the project, I do kind of feel like they're taking on too much.
Yeah.
Maintaining a distribution is not easy, as I think everyone would know. However difficult you think it is, like multiply that by at least 5, if not 10, and that's how difficult it actually is, because you have to deal with the mirrors or the repositories from the distribution on which you base. Plus, you have, in their case, they have their own repository, and all of that is great. But as they're putting out Linux kernel 6, I start scratching my head because I know why they're doing it, and there's a good reason for this, because you have to have a newer kernel to have newer or support for newer hardware. So if you were to go to, I don't know, Best Buy or whatever your computer store of choice happens to be, then you buy the latest computer. A lot of Linux distributions will not work on it, because if the Linux kernel in your distribution is older than the hardware you're installing it on, the same is true for Windows even. It can't
Yeah.
know about hardware that exists in the future. So a new Linux kernel, anytime that's released, you get new driver support for updated hardware, which is great. But a lot of these LTS distributions stick on older kernels, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is it's a bad user experience when you buy a computer at the store that's brand new and it just doesn't work. And then the next version of the distribution does. So the reason why they're giving us the latest kernel, in this case, kernel 6, is a good reason. But at the same time, Ubuntu's already doing this. They already put out new kernels that are, QA'd through their system or go through their tool chain to be approved for release. And they actually keep the kernels updated on their end. So I also feel like there's no reason for Pop! OS or the developers of Pop! OS to custom bake kernels just to get a newer version when the distribution on which they base is already releasing newer kernels. Why not just use the kernels that they put out? But then hopefully it gets rectified soon, because the Linux version 6 of the Linux kernel was actually very, very problematic, and probably the most bug-filled anything bug or Pop! OS has ever put out. I mean, it's like bricking people's systems. It's making things unable to boot. GPU issues are getting worse. Package updates are a problem. So yeah, that's a little concerning. But then again, everyone makes mistakes. But until as long as it doesn't get worse and it gets better, Pop! OS is going to remain as my favorite distribution of choice, because I think all of those issues have been worked out as of now. So as far as I know, shouldn't have any problems. It was a bad couple of weeks, but I guess we'll keep our eye on it.
Yeah. I mean, the it's still better than the Windows update experience. So, but the bar's low.
Yeah, you just had to go there, didn't
I
you?
had to go there. I had
You
to
had
go
to
there.
go there.
I do have a
So I
question
mean,
for kind of related quickly. I'll ask a question
yeah,
to the audience and they can get some feedback to us on this. Do you want us to talk about any of the desktop things in Linux? Me and Jay weren't sure exactly how aligned it is with the Homelab, but I have a feeling a lot of you run Linux on your desktop. So hit our feedback form, hit us up on the socials, and let us know if that's something you want us to kind of talk about or mention from time to time. Just it's a
yeah.
curiosity we have.
And a little bit of a background on that. So when Ubuntu 22.04 came out, we talked about it, because that's an LTS release, something that's way more likely to be run on people's home labs. And with it, with good reason. LTS, long-term support, that's what you want. The intermediary releases are just 9 months of support, which you know it's kind of a trade-off. We love to update things, but rebasing on a new distribution or an updated one is a lot more work. So it's very common for people to stick to that. So we mentioned that. Now Fedora, I thought, was a good fit to mention today, because there's a server version, there's Core OS, there's all these server related things going on there. But then when we think about Ubuntu 22.10, we didn't talk about that yet, because, well, is there anyone out there, and let me know, let us know, is there anyone out there running intermediary releases on your servers in particular? Now, I'm not talking about your workstations at this point, like your VMs, your servers, are they running an intermediary release? I'd be interested to know. And my line of thinking was, well, if there's a home lab fit, I'll mention it. But again, like Tom mentioned, if you feel differently, let us know.
Yep. Should we talk about some TrueNAS updates?
Yes, as a matter of fact, mine just came back up, so it was a successful update, actually.
Are are you updating TrueNAS Core or are you updating TrueNAS Scale?
I haven't moved to scale yet.
Okay. So we'll start with the Core. And now the Core releases, someone will undoubtedly say, as they always do, but Tom, Core is dead. All hell, the new version of Scale. But it's
Hmm.
not really true. As someone who just sold, well, several $100,000 worth of servers to clients with business support contracts for Core, uh, it's not dead. It's being well supported, but it's not where the innovation is going in terms of new features because just like we talked about the new kernel 6, with great change comes great problems. So they are very slowly iterating, just updating versions. So when the release of TrueNAS Core 13U3 and then quickly after that 3.1 because of a bug found in Samba, they're not adding a whole lot on there. They're just kind of bumping versions of software up to the latest. Little things are being added here and there. One of the interesting ones, and this might be of interest to the Homelab people, and hey, let me know in the feedback if you guys have tried this. Both TrueNAS Core and TrueNAS Scale have added Storj Cloud Sync service. Now, if you're not familiar with Storj, I'm not giving it an endorsement just yet, but I have signed up for an account on this. Storj is a decentralized distributed cloud storage system that allows you to participate in offering storage or getting storage back by how much you offer. It's kind of an interesting way to do storage. I want to dig into it deeper, but it's actually being done in partnership with IX Systems. So I would say it's actually a noteworthy change to integrate that in there because people are always going, okay, I know I have to back things up offsite. Good news is it is encrypted before it leaves. So it's safe to put things in the cloud, provided you are the one in control of the keys. That's a really important factor when you think about it. I've talked about Backblaze and other cloud services for backups because, you can, especially if you're a Homelab person, you may not have two physical locations, but you really should consider keeping your data in a secure place. The advantage, of course, of decentralized cloud isn't because it's decentralized, but because it's going to cost less. That's if you want to read between the lines and the buzzwords of the marketing team, it should be able to be a very cost-effective way to store things. I'm uncertain about some of the reliability over it a long time, but the fact that it's got a big company behind it, I think is worth mentioning. There's a bunch of other little stuff that probably doesn't matter to most home users in terms of the features, but you can find those in the release notes. I have a link. I just did a video where I break down the release notes in more detail than I'll spend on them here. Now, what is a little bit more exciting, and I think this aligns even more to the Homelab people, is the release candidate of 22.12 Bluefin. So that is the TrueNAS Scale release. Now, they've made a lot of environment fixes here and a lot of cool things, including some eye candy refactoring of the web UI. That was actually one of the first things on their list. And hey, I think it's really cool that they did that. They're changing the way it lays things out a little. I think it's kind of a more coherent display. I don't think any of this is going to get ported back to Scale or ported back to Core from Scale, but it's still kind of cool that they're taking the time to like realign things a little bit with how the web UI works. They've had already customizable dashboards and things like that, but they go a lot further in making it a little bit prettier. Now, I did note in my video, there is a change with the way it handles the Docker file system. So you may run into an ACL problem when you do an in-place upgrade, or if you add things and you have ACLs on data sets, they have a workaround for that that's noted. It's to lock things down in a more secure way, but there's obviously some insecure things that can occur if you share a folder out and have one of your Docker images using that data set for storage. So if you have a share attached to the data set and you have that attached data set, you could run into some bugs in there. So I did note about that being a potential issue, but they've got an easy fix for it. It's just a matter of checking a little box to say, hey, don't check these features, and you can go ahead and do it. Basically, it's like agreeing to be a potentially insecure situation on there. But nonetheless, I really like the new where they're going with Scale. Now, it is a release candidate, which means try at your own risk. But honestly, a little bit of me feels that the TrueNAS Scale is been a little bit buggy. They keep getting better at it, but it's still a little bit buggy for things. But then again, all the bugginess has really been based around the adding of Docker and Kubernetes, not around the actual device storage. So I've always felt my data is secure on there. That's not where the problems are. It's in the little hiccups I've run into with the add-ons that they built on there, because it's still a NAS first with added on tools. Now, the last thing I'll mention is virtualization. I've been testing it a lot more in Scale, and it works quite well, with the stupid exception being there that's been noted since the old version of Scale, and Bluefin didn't fix this problem. If you set up your main management or whichever IP address comes that you're managing your TrueNAS from, and you connect your virtualization to that, it can't ping it. And I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of different workarounds for bridging and things like that, but natively it can't. And I don't understand why that's not fixed. But that problem still persists in Bluefin. Either way, the virtualization survived from the previous update to the newest update, so that hasn't been a problem. The virtual machines I created still work perfectly fine, and I'll probably be doing a video on virtualization, the pros and cons of doing it inside of TrueNAS Scale. The pros being, hey, it's all in one server, so you're not getting more hardware. The cons being, well, it's not as advanced as Proxmox or XCP-ng, but in terms of, hey, I need a place to run a couple of quick virtual machines, or like I've been doing here, just kind of forking and building out a couple ideas I had and having a local machine to do it because that's what's here in my studio. Yeah, it worked pretty well for that.
Cool.
Bug problems in Samba. I see.
Yeah.
I see people posting that in the live stream. The bug problem that they fixed was specific to some character problems in the shadow copies. It's kind of interesting how Samba presents shadow copies combined with TrueNAS. So the VSS system, volume shadow copy service that runs inside of Windows, is emulated inside of TrueNAS. Now, the way it's emulated and this is more of a Samba thing, Samba and ZFS can work together, and every time a snapshot's created, it can have that present in far as through the SMB present as a shadow copy. This is actually a really cool feature because unlike the volume shadow copies that are within Windows, these are completely immutable because it's just an emulation of VSS, not actual VSS. But to the end user pulling things across a share, that's pretty cool because the end user cannot, if their machine gets compromised, even though they have access to those, it cannot delete them. That's the immutability that comes with them. The only way they can be deleted is via ZFS commands. The only way to get to the ZFS commands is going to be through the TrueNAS console or through the web UI. So provided your web UI isn't tied to your domain login, this has always been a really good way to have a solid grasp on your data where users or something that happens at the user's workstation level doesn't come and destroy your data. So that's a tricky thing. I'm impressed it works as well as it does, but there was a little bug in it. And that's why there's a 3 release and then shortly thereafter a 3.1 release.
Wow. Yeah, like someone said in our chat room, a bug with Samba? What?
Yeah.
Doesn't never happen? Come on. What
Yeah.
kind of
There's
bug would they
always,
fix? Yeah.
and this is it's sad. It's just kind of the universe and the way we sit right now in our world. We've adopted that. All right, we're going to take and emulate SMB, which is funny because I'm emulating SMB on my Pop! OS, which is the most effective way to talk to my TrueNAS that emulates the Microsoft file system as well. It's a Microsoft protocol. It's not. I mean, it's documented to an extent, but it's not like modern by any means, but we've got technical debt, and that's the price we pay to run it.
Pretty much. Pretty much. So all my updates are done and everything seems to work. Nothing broke. So that's between both TrueNAS and Proxmox. And as we were talking, I was also adding tags to the instances because, like the release notes mentioned, it's right there in the UI. And I just started adding tags, which I know XCP-ng has had that for how long? Like, has it been since the inception or
Well,
later on?
tags are specifically a function of the Zen Orchestra tool, and they make
Oh,
things really, really handy because you can first create tags on any type of resource. And I take that back. Maybe they are native to the platform as well. I always use them through XO, but I think they were actually available in the there's a Windows utility you can use to manage Zen. I never use
right.
it. I mean, I used it in the early days, like the version 6 years ago, like 6 or 7 years ago, but not recently. But the tagging is actually a cool feature. I talked about that in the UI and usability because you can tag not just the virtual machines, but you can tag the resources attached to any specific pool, like tagging them production, tagging them lab or anything thereof. Kind of makes it easy when you're trying to hunt down, find resources when you have, very large infrastructure. We have a client with like
Right.
400 virtual machines across a dozen hosts. So yes, they use tagging because that's how you organize all the different areas of things.
Yep. And for people that are watching, like if I just look over my shoulder a little freaked out. My studio's in the basement. Every now and then we have this centipede thing that just runs across the floor. That's always pretty creepy. Anyway, insect problems aside, yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you have a lot of instances, a big environment, I mean, tagging can really help you categorize things and narrow them down. I don't really think I have much of a need for tagging because for my operation, I know I'm not as server relying as other companies might be. Obviously, we have the server for this, you know, podcast here and also the channel, but I think tagging is still pretty cool because it does help you kind of target certain instances that are in a specific category, rather than go through the list manually and just try to figure out which ones you are trying to do some kind of task to. So yeah, I think that is a pretty good feature of Proxmox 7.3 so far.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is we manage these things at scale, and you need scalability and tools to manage those large scale things. That's
Yep.
a lot of what comes out of this. You know, it's one of the reasons my familiarity with these tools are from using them in larger enterprises and things like that. But that's always been an absolute fascination to me that, hey, the same tool for that person running all these hosts that have like half a terabyte or a terabyte of RAM in them also will work in your home lab on your Intel NUC. Like that's a
Yeah.
broad range right there. You can run it on a NUC, you can run it on $1 million worth of equipment.
Yeah, I think I love that so much, and I think that's part of the home lab charm because it's, at least for me, when I first started, there was just something magical about whenever the company bought a brand new server, from Dell or whoever, and it comes in after about 2 weeks after you order it, because back then we didn't have instant gratification like we do now. And it comes in, we put it in the rack, we build the software, we get it running as good as we can, we test everything, and then we put it in production. And that was the only like involvement I had with that back then because, well, I mean, I can't afford to buy like a $10,000 server whenever I want to, try something out. Nowadays, off lease servers, Raspberry Pis, Intel NUCs. It's just so easy to have that, server experience in your house, and it's just so cool to have that ability.
Hmm. Um, I'll of note because I seen someone ask this question there. Sync thing, I should probably do an updated video on. That's a tool that I don't think we mentioned it here, but boy, that's added a ton of new cool features for
Yep.
file synchronization. And Nextcloud's had some version updates probably since we did the video on that. So there's there's a lot of little updates. We just didn't throw them into the show notes to talk about it, but Sync thing since I've last done a video has an entire way you can build untrusted nodes into the mix. So you can have a whole series of syncing nodes, but the ones you trust the least can carry only an encrypted copy of your data, and only people you share a password with can decrypt the data. So you can actually have intermediary nodes that synchronize all the data, but they have no idea what they're syncing. So it is a fun thing to dive into some of these other tools. So we have plenty more videos we'll be coming up with on some of these.
Oh, for sure, and there's no shortage of really cool things to talk about, especially as new versions of our favorite software is released.
Yep. Oh, I seen someone ask about Ubiquity. There's a big Ubiquity release coming soon, and I'll be
Oh,
ranting about what I've found so far. So
yeah, we need to chat after this then.
yeah, we'll talk about those details.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for joining us this update of the change. Me and Jay both have videos on these topics where we dive a little bit deeper into it. Jay's got a whole video series on Proxmox 7.2 to get you started with it, and then click update and go to 7.3 so you can experience those latest changes. I've got the most recent, if you want to see the web UI, the visual of things that have changed in TrueNAS. I just released a video on my channel about that. So go ahead and look for those TrueNAS November 2022 updates that I just posted about. But thanks again for
Yep.
joining us, and we love hearing from you. So hit us up on the socials, use our feedback form. You can get in touch with us. We'd like to hear from you so we can answer questions and talk about the things that the Home Lab crowd is interested in. Thanks,
Yep.
everyone.